Hi, my name is Connor Zladner with Design Workshop, and today we're going to discuss Phase 2 of the St. Tammany Parish Culture, Recreation, and Tourism Strategic Plan. I'd like to start by, again, showing the overall context that we're looking at for this project. And you can see we've really focused our area of study on the most highly developed areas in St. Tammany Parish. From SLIDELL to Lacombe, Mandeville, Madisonville, Covington, and Avita Springs. This is a little bit more of an enclosed look at the area of study that we're focusing on with the Tammany trace highlighted. Today we're going to continue to talk about the Phase 2 items, and we wanted to just bring your attention back to the overall project context and how we got into doing this project. And so, as you know, there's been multiple kind of large disaster declarations for the parish and for Louisiana. And you should know that the parish acquired approximately 95 properties through the hazard mitigation program. These properties cannot be sold back into commerce. They're strictly preserved for flood hazard mitigation and recreation. And so our task has been to determine what the parish should do with these properties with the lens of open space, recreation, or wetland management purposes. Some goals and vision that we established with the client and with stakeholders during the first phase. The project, what we're trying to do overall is create a strategic plan for the new Culture, Recreation, and Tourism Department. And three major goals of property utilization of the plan are to preserve and protect open space, encourage sustainable natural resource management, and to increase tourism and economic development when possible. So we were back in Louisiana 3 months or so ago, and we went through kind of the Phase 1 items, which I'm going to touch upon briefly. And the first step was to catalog properties. So locate all the storm-damaged properties and other parish-owned properties that may go into the strategic plan. And then to establish kind of a large-scale landscape suitability for the properties. And that suitability is specific to recreation, preservation, restoration, and public-private partnership. During this process, we had 3 public workshops, and we had over 150 participants. A few items that came out of those workshops was that cost will certainly be a priority in determining which properties are turned into projects in the future. Restoration and preservation listed as biggest priority for the parish, which you'll see later on in a few maps. A few top programs identified were nature trails, botanic gardens, and education centers. River access was also listed as a very high priority. Along with the public workshops, we had kind of an ongoing online tool that anyone in the parish could use. And you can see here we had over 800 unique visitors. The page was viewed over 3,000 times. And the average participant is a female, 45 years old. And you can see some of these zip codes for Mandeville and things along those lines in St. Tammany Parish. Some of the top ideas that were generated from the website go hand in hand with what we heard at the public workshops. The Tammany Trace is a terrific asset. Where can we extend this network of bicycle jogging trails to other communities? More river access or water access or bayou access through canoe and kayak launches. More nature trails and boardwalks are desired, providing access to natural habitats. This is just kind of a word blog, and the larger the word is, the more times you saw people online writing about it. So you can see here preservation and restoration, streams, nature trails, botanic gardens, wetlands. So we concluded Phase 1 with these 4 maps. And we didn't look specifically at properties, if you know from our Phase 1 workshops. We wanted to look at the whole parish, or at least the highest developed areas of the parish, to help us kind of determined what suitability these properties should have. So you can see the preservation, restoration, recreation, and public-private partnership maps. And those maps helped us determine what these specific properties are suitable for. So we saw 24% of them partnership, a lower percentage for recreation, and preservation and restoration. Preservation at 10%, restoration all the way up at 76%. So you can see that this was definitely the highest category of all of them. And you can also see that these add up for over 100%. And the reason for that is that many properties have multiple suitabilities. You can see the multiple suitabilities in this map. Only a few, Partnership 5, Recreation 5, Preservation 3, and Restoration 70, were very specific to their suitability. And then you can see there was a mix of multiple suitabilities. Again, drawing attention to that restoration at 70. So that was kind of a recap of Phase 1. Moving into Phase 2, our intention is to go from property to projects. So we wanted to develop a very clear methodology of how we match site characteristics to project suitability in order to guide development of current and future properties. And so I'm going to walk you through that methodology and help you understand how we determine what is most suitable from a project standpoint for these specific properties. And so the kind of methodology here is to establish project categories and criteria, determine property characteristics, so what are the specific unique property characteristics for each property, review property suitability for each project. So the first step is establishing project categories, and I'm going to walk you through each one. So the first one is habitat preservation, and these could be large tracts of land that we just let go back to natural, or that could possibly have some type of an educational theme built into them. A few additional benefits are they'll preserve the kind of beautiful tree canopy that St. Tammany Parish has. They could potentially give some increased kind of ecotourism, and ideally they may also reduce flood damage if there's kind of a large water body on site. We see these as kind of low implementation costs and low maintenance costs. A lot of the pieces are already in place. And the next project category is the nature center. This could be small or large size properties. And a few benefits for this can definitely be an educational amenity, potentially a recreational amenity if there are some trails associated with the nature center. At the higher end of nature centers, it could definitely be a regional attraction, a great place for flora and fauna habitats, and certainly tourism potential here. We've got implementation costs and maintenance costs very high on these, and it really depends on the overall program that you want to put into these nature centers. Native landscape restoration is another category, which could be kind of small or large areas of landscape. And these are a few benefits for this is kind of preserving the historic landscape and the historic character of the landscape, improving local biodiversity, reducing flood damage. A few project types may be just kind of a natural landscape restoration where you let the property kind of go back to its natural conditions. And this is something we'll touch on in a little more detail later on in the presentation. Potentially the property could be used as detention or retention ponds. And I think the implementation costs and maintenance costs really varies on these depending on if you just let it go back to nature or if you program it for something like detention or retention ponds. Community park, certainly a large project category. Community parks usually have high to medium programming activity, serving multiple neighborhoods. Focus is generally on active recreation. So a few different project types that may exist within a community park, an open flex lawn that you just come out and throw the Frisbee on, or use it for a multiple of programs such as picnicking, a recreational center, aquatic facilities, small sports fields and courts, maybe a market or cafe, gardens, trails, event pavilions. we definitely see this as a much higher implementation cost and also probably a higher maintenance cost associated with all of this programming. A neighborhood park, kind of a smaller scale community park, lower level programming, serves mostly the local neighborhood, also generally focused on active recreation. Similar project types, but maybe at a little bit of a smaller scale. A few benefits: it increases surrounding property values, improves quality of life, provides community gathering space. The implementation and maintenance costs on this would be kind of in the middle range, certainly lower than the larger park, but definitely a little bit higher than an area that wouldn't have as much programming. Water access as a project category. We think that there's just a great opportunity to access many of the beautiful waterways in St. Tammany Parish. So a lot of the benefits are associated with tourism, local and tourist recreation, and it really serves the rivers and bayous really serve as connections throughout the parish. Low implementation costs, low maintenance costs, most likely for just some type of way to get non-motorized boats into the bayous. A neighborhood amenity, so something with community gardens, maybe orchards or just small playground space. Certainly adds value to the neighborhood, creates value on underutilized land, opportunities for partnerships in the future. The implementation costs and maintenance costs could definitely vary depending on how actively you program the space. And then one of the last, I think, project categories here is the cultural landscape destination. And this really identifies the specific properties that are very close to the Tammany Trace, and maybe an opportunity to think of these properties slightly different because they're so close to this, great recreational and open space spine that goes through the entire parish. Maybe there's a way for future connections to these small properties. So those were the project categories, and now I'm going to talk you through the property characteristics and then explain to you how each property becomes a project. So we looked at all of the properties and characterized them. So the first characteristic that we identified was size. You can see here small to large. And one thing you should definitely notice is that the majority of these properties are small, under an acre in size, 75%. So that will definitely have an impact on the types of projects that we're able to do on those properties. The next characteristic that we looked at was location. So you can see rural, residential, town center, and then again, the majority of the properties were actually in residential areas. So, and they range from suburban to semi-suburban. And suburban may be something where there's a lots kind of right butting up against next to other lots with houses on them, whereas semi-suburban may be a lot with a space of kind of an open lot that hasn't been developed yet, and then another residential lot. And we see kind of on a spectrum of use and programming that the rural areas would be a lower intensity use, whereas you go to more towards the urban areas or the town center areas would have a higher program use. Proximity to the trace was also an important characteristic. How close is it to the trace? You can see here there was only 12% of our properties were within a mile of the Tammany Trace. Open space adjacency, adjacent to development, 82%. Whereas 18% were much further for development. You can see here some project types that may fit into those, into that characteristic. So close to development, maybe a pocket park or a community park where there's a lot of people that can really interact there. Whereas adjacent to open space, that's kind of out there in nature already, may be more suitable for a natural landscape or a natural habitat. Water body adjacency was certainly very important and absolutely key when it comes to the water access project category. You can see only about 11% of our properties were adjacent to water. Recreational service areas, where in the parish do we need more recreation, and how do we factor that in? So 56 of the properties of the parcels were within recreation service areas, whereas 44% were outside of those service areas. Population growth was a factor. Parcels in high growth areas, more suitable for stormwater management facilities, community park, trailheads, only 8%. Parcels in low growth areas more suitable for habitat preservation and native landscapes. These are the areas that are kind of less urban. Floodplain coverage was certainly a criteria that we looked at. Over 90%, as you would guess, since they're part of the hazard mitigation program, over 90% of the properties were in floodplain areas. You can see here, very small percentage were kind of 50 to 75% of the floodplain and less than 50% of the floodplain. So all in all, here's a recap of the property statistics. What type of properties does the parish have? You know, there are over 95 properties that we cataloged, 88% high floodplain coverage. These are 76% under 1 acre. Just a few things to point out as we talk about what these were suitable for. And so then you can see the property project matrix results. So we took the criteria of each property and we matched that with what that would be suitable for from a project perspective. And what you get is this breakdown. And a large percentage are suitable for native landscape restoration. And I'm going to go into more detail on what that possibly could be, or neighborhood amenities. Water access came up high, kind of boat launches, and then the cultural destinations, which are very specific to the trace. And then you can see here there's kind of a sprinkle of a few other smaller ones throughout all the properties. So habitat, nature, regional. And then, so what we'll have online here is a breakdown of the parish on boards. So each one of these boards will show you all of the properties that have been identified. It will show you the phase 1 suitability that we identified, so whether it was suitable for recreation, preservation, restoration, or partnership. And then it will link to a board online that identifies, it gives you all of the information. It tells you the property, it tells you how it rated with all of the characteristics, and then it tells you what that property, what project that property was suitable for. And these will be online for you after the presentation. And so we're going to talk a little bit now. These were very large scale, and I think when you go online and you get into the boards, you'll start to get a sense of what all of this means. But I wanted to talk briefly in a little bit more detail about some of these potential implementation strategies. And so the first one I wanted to talk about was one that came up very high. 44% of the properties were located in this project category, which is neighborhood amenity strategies. So in this situation, we have a disturbed property that's generally on a small lot in a suburban neighborhood. So lot with house next to lot with house. And so you have a few options of what you can do with this property. And we see it as kind of a spectrum from minimal cost, minimal benefits, low intensity use to higher intensity use, more cost, more benefits. So on the one side of the spectrum, you may just keep it as a lawn, potentially add a few trees for shade, and the local community can maybe come out, picnic there, or throw a frisbee. It may become more of a productive landscape or a landscape display. Maybe it's just a grove of beautiful spring flowering trees or beautiful fall trees, or maybe it's a community garden. All the way to the furthest intensity use, maybe you turn into a small pocket park with a playground, maybe some ball courts, whereas the local neighborhood really gets on board and wants this idea of being able to walk their kids down the street to a playground and kind of the ability to meet other people in that sense. And so we have kind of a prototypical example of one of these properties. And again, 44% are these type of properties, and they're these very small lots tucked into existing neighborhoods. So you can see this property up at the top actually came back suitable for all the categories. So you really could take it in any direction. So what we want to do here is show you just a few kind of quick examples of what we just talked about. So you have the flex lawn space option, community garden option, grove of trees option, and then the playground option, and how that kind of goes from low intensity use to high intensity use. And I think this is an opportunity for the parish to really work with the local neighborhood to figure out the best use for this property. The next project category that we want to talk about, and again, 25% of the properties are located in this category, is the landscape restoration strategies. So similar to the neighborhood amenity, these properties are very small lots. In this sense, instead of being tucked into a suburban neighborhood with house with lot next to house with lot, these are in more of a semi-suburban context. So it's a house with lot with kind of an open, underdeveloped lot next to it. So we felt like these had an opportunity to really just go back to more of a natural landscape. And again, it's a spectrum from least intensity use to most intensity use. And so on one side, it may be this, return it to nature and just let it become what it would naturally become. In the middle context there, maybe it's a more of an educational display, again, for the local community to come and interact with. The final category is a functional landscape. So maybe you could turn this property into a retention pond or detention pond so it could actually serve the local neighborhood by capturing water before it goes down into the local bayous and watershed. So next we're going to just look kind of at a specific example, and this is a piece of a string of properties that the parish has acquired along Pontchartrain Drive. And the suitability for this came back as restoration. And so for all of these properties, we need to look at them, look at the program through this lens of landscape suitability. So if it says restoration, really try to come up with a program that's more about restoration. If it said recreation, you would probably look at it in a slightly different way. So for restoration, here are a few of the examples we talked about. Letting it go back to nature, a very restorative nature. Potentially turn it into this kind of display, so you let it go back to nature, but maybe you also intensify it with some cypress trees or some tupelo gum trees that are really very displayed during the fall. Or potentially maybe a retention pond or detention pond. Next, we're going to look in a little bit more detail on some very specific properties. And so this is the green property in Lacombe, which we had a great conversations about during phase one with the local Lacombe community that came out for our presentation. And it was very important to them that we look at this property in the lens of preservation. And so this property actually came back with two project categories, and one was about habitat preservation. And so with the idea of habitat preservation, there are still a few options with the green property to really get the local community and users of the trace the ability to have a light footprint on the property and really experience all the beautiful landscapes the property has. So in this option, it's done through a series of trails, boardwalks most likely. So some boardwalks through the wetland, the cypress swamp, and maybe the bottomland woodland. And then also providing a connection from the trace. The other option that came back in the project category was a neighborhood park. And this is really not meant to be a regional destination. It's really meant for the local neighborhood to really take advantage of and own and upkeep and really enjoy locally. So it's not about large buses of people coming. It's really just kind of about the local community. And so in this situation, the program is a little bit more intense. You can see on the bottom left, it's still only about 15% of a landscape impact. So what that means is the majority of the landscape is still very much untouched. but you find kind of a small area on the site to add a little more program, like maybe a picnic lawn or some gardens or maybe a small nature playground or maybe just some landscape pavilions. The next property that we want to look at is the Airport Road property. And this is out by the mall in Slidell, right off North Shore Boulevard or Airport Road. And the parish owns a few properties here, and there's really an opportunity to do something with them. So our suitability came back as restoration. And we think that there could be a really great opportunity here for an educational restoration option. In this sense, you really retain a very large majority of the existing woodland, and you keep that strong buffer between the bayou and the mall. But you do add in a little more program in a beautiful way that can get people to interact with the landscape here. So they come to the mall, they shop, and maybe they stroll into this landscape and spend a little bit of their day outside doing that. So a series of retention and detention ponds that collect water coming off of the mall and clean it as it goes down to the bayou. And then a series of trails, maybe bike trails, pedestrian walking trails, and maybe even a small promenade where on the weekends people could come out and do a market. And so, again, none of these options are the answer. These are just ideas to get St. Tammany Parish really thinking about what they could potentially do with these properties in the future. And here are just some beautiful images of what these could potentially look like. The last property we're going to talk briefly about before we conclude the presentation is Million Dollar Road property, and this is a property way out in north of Covington, and it came back as Partnership, Preservation, and Restoration. Again, this is just an option for us to show St. Tammany Parish what they could potentially do with this property or other properties similar to it. And so we saw this as a great opportunity, maybe a garden partnership option. And we really like the historical, the history behind kind of timber harvesting in St. Tammany Parish, and loved kind of a program idea of playing that up, associated with a series of gardens. So it would become a partnership. Someone would have to run it. But it would become a great, amazing educational opportunity for St. Tammany Parish, and also a very significant regional attraction. Again, this is just an option of an idea of what the parish could do with this property or another property that has suitable and similar characteristics. And some beautiful images of display gardens. So online, we have a series of maps, and we have the charts for everybody to weigh in on. And this is what the chart looks like. So we looked at the map earlier, which showed you where all the properties were, and then the chart here actually specifically shows you the property, all of the characteristics that we looked at for that property, and then two options, in some cases just one, of what we felt like that property could become as a project. So thanks for taking some time today, and we look forward to any comments you have. You can also find us at exploresttammany.mindmixer.com, which will continue to have some online polling up. We'll be working towards a final report to the parish to be released in early 2015. Thank you.